Hi, everybody. Welcome to Healthcare Americana. I am your host, Christopher Habig. Today, we are touching upon a topic that will probably make anybody's blood boil if they've had any type of experience with the healthcare system before. So today, we are talking to Doug Aldeen, who is an ERISA attorney, attorney at law down in Austin, Texas, and has been on the front lines helping individuals, helping health plans, and helping companies fight some of these egregious, as I'm going to call them, hospital bills, and giving people some advice and a path forward when they're met with these massive bills that nobody can understand in their right mind. So, Doug, welcome to Healthcare Americana. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we were just chatting offline, and it's one of those things. I should have hit the record button as soon as we started into it. But your work down in Texas has seems like it has really opened your eyes into a lot of the issues and the iniquities within the healthcare industry, mostly dealing with large hospital players and the interaction between them and third-party payers, insurance companies, all that kind of stuff. What have you been seeing? Give us the 30,000-foot view, and then dive right into it from your side on what's happening out there to real people and real businesses.
Absolutely. So Chris, from a 30,000 point of view, let's start with the general concept. A not-for-profit hospital, which is tax exempt, is a legal fiction. Okay. In fact, when you look at the numbers, and I'm talking, actuarial numbers, not-for-profit hospitals make more money than the for-profit hospitals. So if you start with the general concept that, not-for-profit is a name only, I think you start there, and then you start, getting into the billing practices, the PPO discounts, which are fictional, that there's arguably collusion between the insurance carriers and the hospitals in terms of driving up the insurance prices as a result of the ACA and the MLR, which we can get into a little bit down the road. But it's really, it's the billing and collection practices of these not-for-profit hospitals, which, and I'm a jaded lawyer. I've been doing this for 29 years. Our job, Robin.
So talking about the non-for-profit, because it's a topic that we've heard people discuss and kind of lament in the past before. Many times, not-for-profit and hospital groups are spending a lot of money lobbying and trying to influence legislature. But as a 501c3 and as a nonprofit, isn't that against the law? So how do they get away with something like that to be able to influence the market like they do and still keep a tax exempt status?
Well, that's a good question. So, the running joke in healthcare is that we're $689 million away from fixing it. And that number represents the dollars spent, let's just say, I think it was 2019, lobbying Congress. So between Big Pharma, the hospitals, and the health plans, $689 million lobbying the members of Congress. And we're not talking, 2 for 20 at Chili's. We're talking big time bucks. But it's not illegal to lobby in and of itself. And and we could talk about a number of different pieces of legislation where the hospitals influence Congress tremendously. As an example, I've run into a recent case with a hospital in the upper Midwest where they paid the COBRA premium on behalf of the patient. So the issue is this: would you pay $610 to access $646,000? Of course you would. Happens all the time. That particular policy forces, so think about this, Chris, you show up, you don't have a job, you're behind on your COBRA payments. If you miss this one, you're out of luck. And the hospital is going to have to eat all those charges. So if they make a payment, they're covered.
That's interesting.
They force you to go to that hospital and all those physicians. So even though you may live in, let's say you live in Cincinnati, you're stuck going to those physicians in Ohio or wherever it may be.
Sure. So going back to $689 million, I like that what you said there. We can fix all the healthcare. I mean, that just makes me think that if they're throwing that much money to influence the federal government, it has to be for the greater good, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to be laughing at that one. So, I mean, what are they, based on your experience and working with ERISA, and I'll let you kind of explain exactly what that means and how that influences groups and businesses. But what has your experience been on trying to open up hospital billing procedures and in finding a little bit of transparency in this world?
Well, it's now that you've mentioned, you think about the recent enactment of the CARES Act, the transparency requirements that were effective at the beginning of the year. And I think the last time I looked, maybe half the hospitals have fully complied. And there's over, close to 5,000 hospitals in the United States. Half of them it doesn't matter because the fine is $300 a day or $109,200 per year. That's an ER visit. That's a few CAT scans and a facility fee.
Well, compliance is a very ambiguous word too. I've seen some interesting price sheets online. What it came out, the Wall Street Journal, I think it was, did a deep dive and found that they were blocking those price pages from being indexed by search engines. So, compliance is, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Well, just to interject, and I actually worked with Anna Matthews on that article, okay? And so what the Wall Street Journal did is they hired Google, and they told Google, give me your smartest, best people, and I want you to go into every single hospital and get the prices. And Google called up the Wall Street Journal and said, well, we took our best people. We couldn't get into New York University, University of Pennsylvania, arguably prestigious academic institutions, because they had a firewall or some type of code that prevented the Google search engine from going there and getting the prices.
Right.
And so, you got to think about it. What are you going to do? Are you going to shut down the University of Pennsylvania and tell them they can't see patients because they haven't complied? You're going to fine them? No, you're not.
What you're going to do is fine them, but then you're going to be in the headlines for finding these nonprofit hospitals that, and they're going to cry that, hey, we're taking care of all the people listed on the Statue of Liberty, the sick, the tired.
And the
we're a charity, right? So give me an idea, when we first started talking, the type of clients that you take on, what type of cases do you usually deal with when you go to work each day?
Okay, so a lot of, a vast majority of what I do is I work with reference-based pricing organizations. And reference-based pricing it's called bottom-up pricing as opposed to top-down. They're typically, which means the plans themselves bear the risk for the payment of those services, as opposed to farm that out to the Blue Cross and United. All right. And what they do is, if you accept the fact that top-down pricing, in other words, first, if you let me set the price, I'll give you a 99% discount every single time because you're letting me set the price. That's what top-down pricing is, and that's why, all the insurance company stock prices have gone through the roof. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So they do bottom-up pricing. You set a defined benefit, like typically tied to a percentage of Medicare, whatever, 170% of Medicare. And then the hospitals, if they're able to identify who these people are, so even think about that concept, you don't even know who is paying you. Okay, that's how inefficient a lot of these hospitals are. They'll balance bill you. All right, and so I'll negotiate those out-of-network bills with the facilities.
Gotcha. So give us an example. Don't use any names or anything like that by any means, but have there been times where hospitals are not honoring those type of agreements?
Oh yeah. So think about this. Hospitals, they have a financial assistance application, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but in many instances, you're going to qualify either on whole or financial assistance. And so what hospitals do, it's the Wild West when it comes to hospital billing and collection. There's no referee. There's nobody looking over their shoulders. If you're on Wall Street, you've got the SEC, you've got FINRA, arguably you've got some place to go. If you're getting ripped off, okay, someone is going to step in and do something. In healthcare, it's not that way. The IRS monitors the 501c3 status, but who's even paying attention to that? Nobody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not prosecuting it. So where do you turn when you have issues like that? Just walk us through the process of you get a call and say, hey, I think I'm getting screwed over by this hospital. They're not honoring what's going on. What do you do? What can you do?
Well, as an example, so in many instances, a lot of my clients will do a medical bill review. So you're going to have two things you're looking at. Okay? You're going to have a repricing report, which is the fair number. Okay, and that's always subject to debate. You're also going to have a clinical review, which is going to have all the coding errors, bundling, unbundling. They billed for this service, but they should have billed for this service. And that's where you can actually have an intelligent conversation with the hospital. When
Mm-hmm.
I tell people we don't really have a balanced billing problem. We have a billing and collecting problem. It's the accuracy of the bill. So forget price for now. Just get to an accurate picture of the number of the bill, and then we can talk about price. That's half the problem.
So you're saying, when you get this bill, get something itemized and then look at it, and, to the physicians, on the physician side, there's 300,000 codes to choose from. And just like, how do you possibly pick the right one when it comes down to that one? And there's some pretty humorous codes out there for some interesting things that happen to people. Oh, sorry, Doug, you kind of cut out there.
I was going to say that would be another podcast. Just interesting CPT codes. I mean, because they're, like you said, some of them are pretty funny.
Yeah, we actually did a social media campaign about that, and so each week we're picking out different types of codes that were just strange and funny. I remember one of them was, it had this code and it said person hit in the head by a flying duck. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like this is actually a thing. And there was another one that was like pecked by a turkey on right index finger. I'm like, what, how, how is this a thing? Why is this a thing? And how much waste does this just compile when people are going through this? And you talk about coding errors, and then you talk about the whole system from that standpoint, and then you get Medicare involved, and if they're going to go after anybody who's trying to do the right thing rather than just listing a bunch of codes and then hoping something sticks from that standpoint. So I mean, it's a mess coming and going. But back to the discussion. So the best thing people can do is what it sounds like is get the itemized bill and get a phone call. Speaking from personal experience, it's impossible to talk to the actual hospital. There's everything is third party, billing, and they don't even seem to have a clue what's going on. Your insurance company is zero help whatsoever because they blame the hospital. And then you got the hospital's collection and billing company pointing fingers at the insurance company is pointing fingers back at the hospital. What's somebody do in that standpoint?
Now what I do, I mean, just by the benefit of just being a lawyer, I'm able to work with somebody typically in the legal department. So if I call somebody, I mean, I'll typically get a response back. And it's just honestly just by virtue of just having been around and someone's going to respond to me. But if you're just, if you're out there and you've got this bill, I mean, the only way to do it honestly is to show up personally. I mean, you hate to say it, but it's a significant undertaking to fix a hospital bill to your advantage. Appropriately so. It's an undertaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from our personal story, it blew my mind that the hospital billed our newborn daughter for all the services. And I'm like, well, show me the contract that she signed with you guys. How are you going to send a newborn into collections? And they're like, oh, we can do it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely a mess.
I've spent 10 years in health systems, both in Champaign and San Antonio. I have a lot of friends there, but when you look at the people that are responsible for that, for those bills and putting them out and mailing them or whatever, I mean, the only thing they're concerned about is what time the pizza gets there, 12 or 12:30. You're just blank. You've lost all compassion. You really have.
And it's frustrating too, because a lot of patient experiences, and let me know if this is similar to, the people you work with, but again, speaking from personal experiences on this, that it's impossible to talk to somebody. They don't want to do anything. They send you, a couple pieces of mail each day, and then you pick up the phone, call them, and they have no idea what's going on, and you have anywhere from 4 to 5 different account numbers that you got to look up each time. I mean, I guess the question is, is it designed like that? Is it designed to be as confusing and troublesome and stressful as it possibly can?
I think that the system was designed to benefit the people who designed the system. So that's the insurance carriers and the hospitals. And, as sad as it is, I mean, we're just grist for the mill. And the sicker you are, the more money they're going to make. I mean, I've had conversations with CFOs, as awful as this is, quote, booking revenue because they got a leukemia patient. I mean, think about that.
Jeez. Gosh. So where do we go? Doug, what are you seeing? What's the solution here? I'm always very solution oriented. How do people look at this and just not, or listen to this conversation and just not lose hope?
Here's what there's a lot based on what I've been seeing in the past couple of years. I mean, there is a significant rebellion, if you want to use that term, movement towards a more transparent system, a cash-based system, where all we have to do collectively as a country is remove the middleman. Okay, because when you think about all those rent-seeking entities that are extracting value without adding anything in exchange, it's huge. And the moment we get to, and I'll call it Marcus Welby-like care, which is the doctor-patient relationship, and you get rid of all the extraneous fluff, we're going to be so far down the pike, and everybody's going to be happy. Doctors are going to be doing what they're trained to do. Patients are going to be getting better. I mean, but that's ultimately what needs to happen. And I do believe, honestly, and it's an incremental. It happens on incremental steps. I mean, you just can't. I mean, you think like you're trying to turn the Titanic around at 90 degrees within 5 minutes. It's just not going to happen.
And we all know what happens on Titanic.
Right. I mean, it's ultimately the iceberg in this analogy is going to be a government takeover, because you can't have hospitals. As we're coming out of COVID, I mean, 40 to 50% of hospitals are operating in the red.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's their business model, which is fee for service, elective surgeries, et cetera, et cetera. And you can't have people that live in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, not have access to a hospital. It's a health and safety issue. So,
well, then flip that around. You also have these community hospitals sending everybody in town to collections on the same vein of it, and it is a vicious kind of race to the bottom, and not in a good market forces, good competitive way where prices are being deflated. It's really the opposite. And the race to the bottom is, I would counter on the iceberg analogy and say the iceberg is going to be, personal debt and bankruptcies that are going to drag people down. And then we don't see, people don't try to get care anymore. And we've already seen that with COVID. And, I'm kind of bracing, not just to see the fallout from the past year from a market standpoint with supply chain and lumber shortages, you name it's going to be in shortage. But what happens when all those people that needed care didn't go to it? I have a bad feeling that everybody's going to show up at once, and there's going to be some bad outcomes that happen.
I would, 100%. I think that, I think you start with, forcing hospitals to honor their charitable mission. And if you look at the hospital's financials, I mean, you can look at I'm actually working with one right now. Think about this. Their charity care is less than 1%. It's like 0.08.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think you start with really working with these hospitals, defining some uniform standards across the country, because there are no uniform standards. Each hospital can make its own decision in terms of what level of care they want to do, who they're going to offer to, financial requirements, all that. Start with some basic uniform standards. Force these. You think about what a hospital was 60 years ago. It was a place you either went to die or you had a car accident or a heart attack. Now you can go to a health system, have Starbucks, and take a yoga class.
You absolutely can. It's that touches upon one of the things, and one of the biggest kind of the negative aspects of what we're doing here at Freedom Healthworks and helping physicians exit insurance and third-party dependency, and helping patients and companies find those physicians, is what about the hit by a bus scenario? What about if I get in a car wreck? What happens then? And that has been the toughest thing to overcome, because while there are cash-based ERs in certain parts of the country, I know Texas has some cities in Texas have a great little system there. But private ERs, that's the biggest thing, in my opinion, that are holding people back, is the, what if I get in an accident? What if I get cancer? What if I have some major surgeries? I have to have my insurance policy. And if I'm paying for insurance, I might as well use it to, for everything, for all the prepaid healthcare type of stuff. What's your reaction to that mentality?
Well, one, and that's, let's use the get hit by a bus. You're probably better off not having insurance, to be honest with you, because you're going to show up in the ER. They're obligated to care for you. So, you're going to get at least a really good first bite of the apple just by not having insurance. And then ultimately, if you don't have insurance, you're going to be able to access, because you're going to be what's called medically indigent or indigent. You're going to access their financial assistance policies until you're 100% better. So, you hate to say, but you're probably better off. And even if you did have some type of major medical insurance, let's just say it's called a $25,000 deductible. I mean, with the hospital, with their hyperinflated charges, if it was a $500,000 bill, would they waive 25 without it? Wouldn't even think twice about it. As long as they could access the insurance money, yeah, I wouldn't even talk about it.
That's pretty powerful, right? It's like, so the financial assistance aspect of it, you mentioned that a couple times. What exactly is that for people listening out there who might not know that that's an option?
It is an option each and every single time. So you can go to any hospital's website, review their financial assistance application. What type of information are they looking for? For example, I'll just use University of Pennsylvania. It's one pay stub. I mean, they have such a significant endowment, okay? Billions and billions of dollars. They don't even care. Just one pay stub. Here's what it is, and then you're going to be able to access what that rate is, and it's what's called your AGB, amounts generally billed. And if you look at a hospital, okay, now think about this. Amounts generally billed represent all claims divided by all payments. So it's Medicare, Medicaid, self-pay, commercial, okay, divided by all payments. And there are hospitals in this country where the AGB is single digits, and I'm talking 8%. So for every dollar they bill, they collect 8 cents. So that's the real number. So if you're paying anything more than that, you're overpaying.
Wow. Well, how do insurance companies tolerate this? Aren't they supposed to be on our side? I'm asking tongue in cheek, but aren't they supposed to be out there fighting for their clients?
Right. And so when we get done with this podcast, I'm going to send you the financial or I've got a client this for all the different health systems across the country. His name's Leon Wisniewski. It's Health Cost Labs, super smart guy. So in your backyard with IU Health, okay, surprisingly, they omitted Anthem. So when they published all the prices, they did Cigna, they did that, they did that, but they didn't post Anthem, which is in your backyard. Now, why is that? Because Anthem is paying the most. So if you have Anthem in Indianapolis, and this happened to be major hip and knee surgery, you're way overpaying. And I'm talking, I don't know, 500, 600%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so much for transparency,
Exactly.
compliance, right? Yeah, and those two organizations are about 2 miles away from each other, if that, maybe just a mile here in downtown Indianapolis. So good to see that they get along there.
Exactly. So if you're an employer, in Carmel, Indiana, and you've got Anthem, there's a pretty high probability you're way overpaying.
Goodness. So again, I don't understand the argument when people say, well, we can't have transparency because competition is going to be bad for everybody, because they're looking at that and saying, Aetna and Cigna call up IU and say, I want Anthem's rates, or vice versa. And I'm thinking, anybody who says that has absolutely zero experience or zero education from any type of business aspect ever.
Exactly. I mean, it's always been OPP or OPM, other people's money. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, when your cash pay rate is significantly less than what the insurance carriers have, I mean, it just goes to show you that, you know, the insurance dollars benefit the insurance carriers. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
reality.
and that's a great point because we encourage our listeners all the time whenever you have an encounter for the non-physicians, if you have an encounter with any type of care need, ask what the cash price is. You're going to get some funny looks from people at the front desk, but ultimately they're going to figure it out, and then probably, I mean, what are the chances? 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 that the cash price is going to be vastly cheaper than what your deductible would be or anything else that was even dealing with an insurance plan.
Yeah, exactly.
And the people at the office usually will be like, hey, this is a lot easier. It's the insurance that makes it a lot difficult. You're going to make their lives a lot easier too once they actually understand what the cash price is.
You know, and again, I have no problem with people making money, but if you look at the salaries for United CEO, the Humana CEO, and their it's stock-based compensation. Okay, I mean, just last year, I mean, the United CEO made $79 million. That's more than LeBron James. Okay, I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. I mean, it's off the backs of people who need help. I mean,
Yeah.
LeBron James just dumps in your face because he can. I mean, otherwise, you know, I just, and it's a rigged system.
Yeah. And, I always like taking that argument that, everybody says, oh, these top CEOs, people running these companies are overpaid. And, I'll counter it. There's only a handful of people that are able to do that job in the world living right now. What gets me is that, like you said, it seems like it's rigged against any other type of market forces. So if he makes, if you have a CEO and they make $80 million a year and they're transparent and they're beating everybody on competition and, they're providing great products, good for them.
Right.
But what gets me is billing yourself, not an insurance, but, these hospital systems bill themselves as nonprofits and charitable organizations. You take home massive amounts and then you turn everybody over to collections and ruin, people's lives, make them, turn them into bankruptcy, all that kind of stuff, because they weren't able to ask the right questions in order to skirt the system and get around all the little games of gotcha that exist out there. That's what pisses me off. And like I said in the introduction here, that's what makes a lot of people's blood just boil, because you feel helpless. You really do. You're like, I called this number, I got the runaround. Like I said, they said, talk to your insurance company. Insurance company said, talk to your healthcare, your hospital. And people just give up.
They give up because, I mean, think about it. You're recovering from a car accident. You're probably on some type of heavily, sedation. You're not really thinking clearly, and it goes on for months and months, and you never get an answer. And the phone calls and the letters. The next thing you know, your credit's impaired. You can hardly walk. Your back hurts. I mean, it's overwhelming. The whole thing is overwhelming, without a doubt.
Number one cause of bankruptcy: medical bills, unpaid medical bills.
And think about this. I mean, the hospitals are the judge, jury, and executioner. So if Chris submits an application for financial assistance and they turn you down, I mean, what are you going to do? There's nowhere else to go. And on top of that, you could be in a market, and I'll use my hometown in Champaign. I worked at the Carlson. It's a monopoly. You got 100 miles to Indianapolis, 100 miles to Chicago, 100 miles to St. Louis. You don't like it? Okay. I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're going to call Doug. They're going to call you up and say, Doug, what do I do here?
And a lot of these people, because the problem compounds, right? Because you need to go back, you need follow-up treatment, you maybe need corrective knee surgery, and you're going to get no service because you haven't paid your bill. And so you're going to have to hop in a car, you're going to drive some other place. And it's just, the whole thing is just, I mean, sad.
It is. But it sounds like there's hope here. So, Doug, I'm going to give you a last word here. What is the perfect healthcare industry and the perfect healthcare, I don't like the word system, so I'm going to stick with industry. What does that look like to you? How do you wave your magic wand and poof, everything is fixed. Everything is operating as it should be.
Here's what I think. I think, one, you make insurance by its very definition catastrophic events. So if you have progressive insurance, would you use your progressive insurance to buy gas? Of course not. Okay, it's catastrophic. So we've got to redefine insurance, which is for catastrophic care only, hit by the bus, the heart attack, that kind of stuff. And we go to a cash pay basis. We get rid of all the middlemen, okay? And you've got a very firm doctor-patient relationship, which is backed by a catastrophic policy, just like it is in the auto liability world. And I think that's a great place to start, because I don't think that, a government takeover can work. I mean, because Milton Friedman said, or was quoted as saying, if the U.S. government was in charge of the Sahara Desert, it ran out of sand in 5 years. So I don't subscribe to, government healthcare at all.
No, there's no fixes coming out of it. It's why UPS and FedEx seem to make money and do very well for themselves, while the Postal Service is just in quicksand every single year and deeper into the red. You look at VAs and there's the disservice that they're doing to our veterans serving this country. And you have clear examples of government takeover of industry that fail and that don't work. Look at rail lines, look at Amtrak. Anything the government has a hand in is hurting in producing subpar vehicles. Hell, I'd even say that GM and Chrysler back in 2008 and 2009 had some pretty rough years there before they got their act together, from government involvement and some just vehicles that nobody wanted. So there is a track history of this happening. So I'm right there with you. And then not to mention, you threw out that figure of the, $689 million in lobbying that is being paid to people to influence government. And you just don't get the sense that they're the ones to fix it. And of course, one size fits all is not going to work for everybody, whether you're on the East Coast, the West Coast, the southern part of the states, or like us in the Midwest here. You can't have a one size fits all. It's got to be locally priced, locally available, like you said earlier.
Without a doubt.
Doug, it's been a pleasure talking to you here. I want to thank you for coming on to our show and talking to us a little bit about your experiences and what you've seen. I think the biggest takeaway is that, and I'll let you speak to this, that if you do need to use medical services, and definitely don't put off medical care if you need it, but you've got to be able to ask questions, especially when it comes to pricing.
That's correct. And not only the pricing, but if the bill is you're entitled to access the hospital's financial assistance policy within certain parameters. And so I think, like you said, entitled to the price, and and maybe that bill can be written off in its entirety or substantially, depending on the financial assistance at that hospital.
That's good advice. Good advice, Doug. I appreciate it. Doug Aldeen, an ERISA attorney at law, Austin, Texas. Doug, thanks for taking the time to chat with us here. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Chris, thank you so much. Have a good day.
That's going to do it for this episode of Healthcare Americana. Once again, I am your host, Christopher Habig. For all our past episodes, visit healthcareamericana.com. And to learn more about the cash pay movement, I will say, or the direct-to-consumer healthcare movement, visit freedomhealthworks.com. Thanks for listening. Hi again, everyone. This is Chris. At Healthcare Americana, we're always on the lookout for great stories to tell in the healthcare industry. And we'd like to hear yours. Check out healthcareamericana.com and send us your ideas for episodes, or if you'd like to be a guest. Thanks again for listening. Hope you enjoy it.